Hello and welcome to the ReConnect Podcast, a weekly show sponsored by the Anasazi Foundation and powered by Sturry Studios. I'm Ganel-Lyn, your host. I'm so grateful you've joined us, where we have conversations to help you strengthen your most important relationships and reconnect with those that matter most. Hello and welcome to the ReConnect Podcast. I am Ganel-Lyn, your host. We are here at the Sturry Studios and we are so grateful to be with you today. We're thankful for Anasazi Foundation for sponsoring this podcast, and we are thrilled every time we get to have a new guest on to help us unpack the idea of connection, and today you are in for a treat. This guest of mine is a dear friend, and actually we call each other sister. We are not sisters, as you could probably tell. I don't think we look like we're sisters, do we?
I'd love it if I looked like you.
I'd love it if I looked like Lorraine.
Take it.
Lorraine, for those that are familiar with my very first book, I Can Do Hard Things with God, you may be familiar with Lorraine's story, not her face, because it wasn't like Harry Potter where the pages moved with a picture. That would have been really cool, right?
Or scary.
Or not. Lorraine and I have a very beautiful, interconnected story that has interwoven our lives in a way that I just feel so blessed. And I'm thrilled that she agreed to do this, because if you don't do this kind of thing, it's a little nerve-wracking, is it not?
Intimidating.
It is a little intimidating. For me, I feel like I make myself look foolish publicly on a very regular basis. But I just taped an episode about courage, and I talked about how last week when I did this big thing up in Salt Lake that was really scary. And the whole week I was like, why is this scaring me so much? Because I've done like 1,000 events in 5 years. I do live TV and radio. What is wrong? So it's okay that we're vulnerable, because we cry here, we laugh here, and we don't have to be perfect. We're just human beings talking about real life stuff. And so,
sounds good.
Yeah, we're just going to go for it. So a little backstory. I have invited Lorraine to come on the podcast today because she has a beautiful story of loss and grief and finding love and healing again. And I feel like most guests, I let them tell the backstory, but I feel like I need to tell the backstory because I'm a significant part of the backstory.
Very much, very much.
So Lorraine was previously married to a wonderful man named Robbie.
Correct.
And you had how many children?
4.
4. And how long were you and Robbie married?
We were married 13 years.
13 years. So long enough to feel like this is my person. This is what you're going to do the rest of your life. You own a business together. You were raising your kids together. You were happily married.
Yes.
And then how much do you want to share about Robbie's passing?
As time has gone on, and especially recently, I am realizing it might be important to share a little more than I ever have with that.
I felt that too.
I think it's important.
Okay.
So Robbie comes from a pretty dysfunctional upbringing. Mm-hmm. He has 2 parents that are dealing with different mental illnesses. And when he was 12 years old, his parents divorced, and his dad remarried, and he lived with his dad. And his dad's the one that pretty much raised the kids, because his mom, through some mistreatment of his dad, her mental illness became a lot worse, and she was not really capable of raising the kids. So that's his past, and when I met him, I didn't know a lot about that, but learned more as we dated and got to know each other.
Kind of marriage, right? Like, as much as you date, you still, like, until you're living and sharing a life together, all of a sudden then you become parents, it probably triggers all his own childhood stuff that you're like, wait, what?
And a lot more comes out over time. And Robbie dealt a lot with anxiety. And as you know, that can lead to depression. Yeah. And he battled that pretty much our whole marriage to some degree. In the beginning,
did you know that? Did you feel it was just his personality?
Yeah, probably
and
more
you wouldn't
that.
have labeled it.
Probably more that, yeah. I know as we maybe halfway through our marriage, so maybe 7 years in, he would start to share a little more with me about his fear of becoming mentally ill himself.
Because he had watched his mom.
Yeah. He would always say, if I ever turn crazy like my parents, will you please let me know? Like, he was so worried that it would happen and he wouldn't realize it had happened. His mom is schizophrenic, among other things, I'm sure.
Which is a pretty heavy diagnosis to have in your life as a child.
Sure. And she was in and out of the mental hospital and wouldn't stay on her meds. Yeah. And so interactions that we had with her were a little bit scary. Yeah. He would worry about our kids being around her. Yeah. Worried that she might take our kids. Yeah. Just because she didn't get to raise her own kids. Yeah. And there was a lot of heaviness there for sure for him. But he really started battling a lot of anxiety and depression. And, I remember there were times where he would be afraid to fall asleep because he was afraid he would die in his sleep. And so I would tell him, I'll stay awake and watch you. I'll stay awake and watch you breathe. I'll wake you, and that would help him be calm enough to go to sleep. And while I could certainly sympathize with his situation, I had no idea what that felt like.
Because that was not your childhood. That was not your experience at all.
The anxiety, I had no idea what that felt like. Yeah. But I loved him so much that was not a big deal for me to stay awake and watch him.
For those that know Lorraine, that's no shock. Oh. You're a generous, loving soul. So
thank you.
This went on for a while, and then
it went on for a while, and then we had our family, we had our 4 kids, and we knew we were finished having kids, and he went in for a vasectomy, and they gave him pain pills after that, and he started taking the pain pills and felt this whole
different
euphoria. Everything's great. I feel so good. I feel
the anxiety
happy.
Is now gone for the first time.
Yes, and he recognized that was something that helped his anxiety. And so he found ways to get a hold of little things here and there just to kind of supplement his anxiety. And he was on a couple of medications doctor prescribed, but
mainly it was the pain pills.
Yeah.
And did you know that could you start to see signs?
I knew that's what he was doing.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew.
Did you ask him about it?
Yeah, he was always very open and honest about it. And
which is huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Because I think any time something becomes a chronic behavior, if there's not complete honesty, then there's this other layer of pain for loved ones.
Yeah, for sure. Well, then in the course of those events, his grandfather is actually his stepmom's father. He was very, very close to him, and he passed away. Oh. And that was a really hard loss for Robbie, because he was kind of his father figure. He was such a great man. We spent a lot of time with them, and he really meant a lot to him. So that was a really hard loss. Mm-hmm. And at that point, he took a hard turn for the worse.
And the pain pills became more...
Yeah. But really, I think that's more when he really started recognizing these pain pills really help with this. And it was all kind of at the same time that happened. And then, he just, with stress with his business and more anxieties about, am I going to turn out crazy like my parents? Yeah. And just a lot of different things, kind of the perfect storm. Yeah. He became a little more and more dependent on that. And he just over a short period of time, got a hold of something a little stronger. And then we had kind of one big event where he ended up taking more than
normal
than he should have, not realizing, not knowing that that's what had happened.
And that was enough.
That was enough. And he died in the night. And
which was exactly his fear.
Yeah, it was actually.
And you found him.
Yeah.
And how old was your oldest and how old was your youngest when this happened?
My oldest was 11 and my youngest was 3. So I had 11, 7, 4, 5. 11, 7, 5, and 3. And so I find him it was Labor Day weekend, on a Sunday morning.
Sheesh.
I woke up to our new puppy that he had just bought for the kids. She immediately came to my bedside when my alarm went off to get up ready for church, and she was whimpering, and I immediately knew something was wrong, and I went into our bathroom and found him. Yeah, and so, of course, just
the whirlwind of grief,
yeah.
right? Like, I think those early days, I think just recently sharing a message about Meg, my sister who took her life, I remember, like, for this event, I had to go into more detail. Yeah. It wasn't just like, oh, my brother found her. It was replaying, which I've written about and in our book. Yeah. And I remember feeling all the same feelings. Yeah. I could feel the smell, the air, everything. And that was it. Is it still that way for you? How long has he been gone?
It can be that way. We just hit the 15-year mark.
Can you believe it?
I can't. I didn't think I would survive a day.
Yeah,
without
because
him,
the other story
years at a time.
Yeah, the other story that happened, and we don't have to go into too much detail. The business that you had was in partnership with his siblings. Right?
It was actually his business, but he had a dear friend that was helping run it.
And it did not turn out well.
And that friend, after Robbie passed, that friend, as well as Robbie's brother, decided to help run it and help me out.
Which here you are now, a widow.
A brand new widow, 4 little kids. They were so generous with their time and their desire to help me, and they were so willing to do that. And the one was already working in the business, and the other one had previously had experience in the business. And so they both said, you take care of the kids, we will build the business and get it to a point where you can sell it. And that was Robbie's desire in the first place, was to just build it and then sell it and then do something else with his time and talents. So
but instead,
I trusted that and went with it, and instead they
stabbed you in
the
the back.
Formed their own business on the side and ended up taking all of our accounts. But the silver lining in that, the last account that I lost was 2 weeks before I remarried, and it.
Oh my gosh, I didn't
the transition
know that.
of that was really, I know the Lord's hand was in that the whole way along. Even though they were ripping me off, my family's needs were met all the time. Yeah, every time. We didn't go without. I didn't have to go get another job.
You had it until the minute you, And I think that's such a beautiful part of who you are, that I almost feel like it's so second nature to you that when people feel surprised by your story, I think it's because I can see from the outside, they're like, wait, that's not common. And there's more to this story that's really, I would say, uncommon and beautiful. But one of the things is you went through this betrayal while you're grieving and trying to adjust to taking care of your children in their grief at very key ages where they're all grieving in different ways because they're different ages and they have different experiences, and your own grief, and then your business, and then betrayal with the business.
And your livelihood. And
your partner, your person that you process everything through. Yeah. So this is where I come in to the story.
This is where.
We had a mutual friend that did our hair.
She was my visiting teaching companion.
She was.
And neighbor.
Okay, so my hair person, Dixie, shout out to Dixie. At the time, I was a part of a regional women's magazine, that I love, and I still to this day love. I don't know if I'd be doing everything I'm doing now without that experience. It was pre-Facebook groups. I mean, when I try to explain the magazine, I say, do you understand there was no Instagram accounts for women that were like hashtag widowed, hashtag infertile, hashtag young moms with kids that have autism. There was none of that.
Right.
And so we were trying to create a publication called Wasatch Woman, where we would tell stories of women along the Wasatch Front in a way that, because we can be a little bit homogeneous, I don't know if that's the right word, like it looks like we're all the same. And so we were trying to spotlight women that had different careers and different family dynamics and religions and professions and ideas. And we were doing that because we wanted to create connection.
Right.
Because there was no Facebook. Nobody had a Facebook group to join to say, I'm having a baby in June. Do you know there's literally Facebook groups for that? Like in November 2019, and they all become friends.
Beyond that phase.
Yeah. So, I mean, now we have all these platforms where we're creating connection. We have podcasts and YouTube channels, but there was none of that. So I was part of this beautiful group of women, and we were producing this magazine, and I was writing and editing, and I have my own health journey story of chronic illness with lupus, and I have gone through significant chemotherapy, and I have a beloved family doctor that I would go to him over all my specialists because I just trust him, and he's been our family friend and doctor for so many years. Anyways, he knew I was doing this kind of career experience of the magazine, and one day he said to me, I know someone that you need to know. You guys are so the same. And she's wonderful, and she's going through her own chemo treatments. And I'm like, okay. And I was to the point where, because of the magazine, people were chronically kind of saying, hey, you need to talk to so-and-so. You need to do a story about so-and-so. But I trust Dr. Barry. So I said, okay, tell me. And he told me a little bit about Carrie. I haven't cried about her for a long time. He told me about this beautiful soul who was a stepmom and had been trying for years to have a baby, and her wonderful husband, Evan, and how she had been fighting breast cancer, and how she had given up on the chance of having a baby of her own. And then through a series of beautiful events, gets pregnant, but doesn't realize also the cancer is back, and so they need to put her back on chemo treatments that are pretty heavy doses, and she's pregnant. They think maybe with twins. The story's kind of unraveled a little over the years, right? And so she's at this point where, like, I either treat my cancer or I protect my baby, because anyone that knows anything is chemo kills everything inside of you, and if you're carrying a child. Well, her and Evan are taking Evan's boys to go to Disneyland for the weekend, and they're wrestling with this decision. And while they're gone that weekend, she has a miscarriage. And they call Dr. Barry and say, the decision's been made for us. When we get home, and he says, come back in the office and let's make sure everything's checked out, and make sure you're good to go. What they think happened is that she probably was carrying twins and lost one of them. And they start her chemo. And they don't know for quite a few weeks and months that she is actually still pregnant. And they are blasting her body with chemo.
Yeah.
And she goes in for a scan for the cancer to see if there's been a change. And the poor tech that day is like, oh my gosh, there's a baby. So she leaves the room, and Carrie told me later, she was just like, something's wrong. And the effects of chemo on a body when you're pregnant is there's no amniotic fluid, and usually there's no natural development and lots of issues. And so all of a sudden what they thought was one issue is now a whole nother issue, because now they have this baby that has survived all this chemo.
Yeah.
And they start the process of planning the funeral, basically, because I know even Dr. Barry said they had kind of planned, like, she would give birth and there would be no crying, because there's no way there's brain development if there's no amniotic fluid or a lung development, so she won't be able to cry. They knew it was a girl at this point. And so they were going to have the crash team there, but Carrie and Evan had picked out headstone and clothes, and this was what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And they go in and
Induced her a couple weeks early, just hoping that would mean that the baby could be born alive, at least.
yeah, they just wanted a few minutes with their baby.
Yeah.
And when Ellie was born, Ellie is screaming, and that's funny if you know Ellie. And Evan and Carrie were both like,
What?
wait, what? Was that a scream? And the crash team comes running in and takes the baby away. Fast forward, Ellie lives.
Yeah.
And Ellie is just a little bit younger than my daughter. So now I'm realizing why it's been 15 years since Robbie's passed, because I'm doing math. Brooklyn's going to turn 16 in January.
Yeah.
So crazy. So when I was introduced to Carrie, she had a beautiful little toddler girl, and our girls would play together, and we became sweet, dear friends. And we had conversations that weren't normal among other women. Conversations about, if I die, I've already told my husband to date this person, this person, this person, because at the time I have just gone through another year of chemo myself for a heart condition with lupus, and I had lost my hair, and I had done this 3 times, and my family had these conversations. My marriage included conversations of, if I die, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And we also just related on some other levels that, you know, our husbands just would crack up the way we would talk, and she was starting to get worse and worse, and I was getting better. I was actually in a healing phase. I had finished chemo, so I was in what I call the year after the year of chemo. It's the year of regrowing everything that died. And we would get together and we just could talk about the things that, unless you've been through some of that, the reality of what it does to your body and your marriage and your life and your parenting and all that. And I decided to write an article about her, because I just loved her and I wanted to put her in the magazine, because she was exactly our why of telling the story. So I wrote an article titled "Live Like You Are Dying," and it eventually won an award. And I had never written an article like that on a platform like that, and it was very personal about how Carrie and Evan really were embracing parenting this child that they had wanted for so long, and really living through the idea that Carrie was going to die. And Evan knew he was supposed to get married again. Rob knew he was supposed to get married again. There was no question about this story. So this article comes out, and it's at in Dixie, my hairdresser's hands, and Lorraine reads it. And Robbie has already passed at this point, right?
Yeah, about 3 years.
So
previous.
I had heard of Lorraine's story through Dixie, because Dixie was going to church with Lorraine and really was admiring how you were navigating the grief and trying to raise your kids and show up every Sunday. I remember her saying, like, Lorraine comes and she's just like so positive and loving and happy, and Dixie brought up one day, she's like, so she read the article about Carrie and Evan. Do you want to tell a little bit more about that backstory?
Well, I just remember her inviting me to dinner with her. And we showed up at a pizza place, and she hands me the magazine. And she says, there's a really neat article in here you need to read. And I opened it up, and I see this beautiful family, the pictures in there, and you know, she just starts telling me a little bit about it, and that so this man's wife has now passed away, and I thought she was just saying, and could use some support, could use someone to talk to about navigating this road, which I was more than happy to do. But she said, and you know, maybe you guys could date. And I look at Carrie, you've seen her, she's beautiful, and then read her story, which is incredible. And I thought, I am not going there. I could never fill the shoes of someone like that. That I don't even want to try. But I'll be his friend. I'll talk to him. I'll help him with anything he's going through that he needs help with. And so,
So we're going to pause right there because from the time the feature comes out, Carrie doesn't pass yet. And then she starts to get really bad really, really fast. And anyone that has loved someone through cancer and dying of cancer, there's a point where the liver shuts down and you turn very yellow. And I remember being over at Carrie's house. She's beautiful, loved clothes, loved purses, loved shoes, decorated
jewelry,
and would spend money on it. I mean, like, her hand-me-downs, the stuff that she bought how many years ago, her sisters are still using them, and they still look perfect because she spent a lot of money.
Right.
Lorraine and I are not as much like that. So Carrie was my friend that, like, her fashion level was like 10 times. We didn't share that as much in common.
Right.
But I mean,
she was also a bargain shopper.
She was.
Like,
she was.
Get it on a deal.
Yes.
It wasn't spend a lot of money on this. It was find a good deal.
Yeah, but she enjoyed it, and she did it very well, and her closet was very plentiful.
Yes.
And I remember going over one day, letting the girls play, Brooklyn and Ellie, and she knew she was getting close to the end. And she had all these to-do lists. Oh my gosh. She was like going to clean out these closets, and this drawer was going to get reorganized, and she had to do something with this insurance thing, and the car had to go in for the oil. I mean, I was exhausted.
Wow.
And finally, I was like praying to God, and I was like, I don't want to tell her what no one's telling her. So I tried to gently say, so what are the doctors saying? Because inside, I'm like, your eyes are looking yellow. And your skin is looking yellow. It's not very much longer. You're not going to have time to do all these to-do lists. But Carrie was very, very, very determined and organized, and she produced events. And so she was very much like handling all of this dying as producing an event. Yeah. And I just quietly said to her, Carrie, I am your friend. And I love you, and I'm going to say something to you, because I'd helped my grandma die of cancer, of breast cancer. So I had gone through this. I had seen what happened to her skin and her eyes, and that was within 2 weeks. So we had a conversation. I said, okay, I'm a to-do list girl too. But on this to-do list, let's just say this hypothetically. Hypothetically, because the doctors were saying a few months at this point. I said, hypothetically, what if I told you had a week? What on this to-do list would matter the most? And my friends, pretty much nothing. Yeah. I mean, she was worried about some like practical things for Evan and Ellie. I said, I'm going to just say as your friend, what I'm seeing right now is you don't have a couple months. And I'm not a doctor, but I'm just going to say to you as your friend, you would say this to me. What on here is the most? Because I don't want you to use the last week or a few days doing a to-do list. I want you to do what matters the most for you. And she did. She listened to me, which was great. And within a week or so, and I went, she passed on Mother's Day.
Day after.
Yeah. And every year that changes, so that's not right. My father-in-law died on Thanksgiving, and so every year we think it's Thanksgiving, but it changed anyway. So I went and said goodbye when she was in the raspy breathing death breath, and she was on, hospice and morphine, and it was not easy. She has some wonderful sisters that are literally her genetic birth sisters. And through this experience of saying goodbye to Carrie, they became a beautiful part of my life, and a relationship there. And we were able to publish an update story of Carrie in the magazine when she did pass in honor of her. And the funeral was beautiful. And Tanya, her sister, sings in a group called One Clear Voice. If you ever Google them, you'll know she sang at the funeral. And Evan went through the motions, Evan was brilliant and grieving and trying to be a dad, and people rallied. But you, of all people, know that is an out-of-body experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're showing up for your kids, and you got to still go to work, and everyone kind of gave advice. And I remember at one point, Carrie had been gone a few weeks, and Dixie and I had a conversation. And she said, so I don't know how Evan's feeling yet, but you remember Lorraine? I let her read the article, so that brings us back to that. Yeah. And I think they could maybe what you think? Date? Go on friend conversation? trips. And I was like, okay, and Evan knew. Like, Evan knew that Carrie and I were in his face before Carrie died saying he would get married again. So this wasn't like an optional plan, right? And so it wasn't like I was I am the weird friend, but it wasn't like I was the weird friend that was like, hey, I know your wife just died, but hey.
Right.
Because I knew.
Well, and to clarify, it was probably more like a few months.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking.
Yeah, I wasn't.
She passed in May, and this was what, November?
Yes.
So
it
wasn't like the creepy in his face way too soon.
Yeah, and I would check on him once in a while and just stop by, and everyone was kind of like lasagnas and notes on the door, and here's
the phone number.
Yeah. So at one of my check-ins, I was like, and by the way, here's a phone number, and I remember him bristling, like we're standing on the porch, and he was just like, well, and he's getting all shifty.
I'm sure. How can I disappear?
And I go, Evan, I love you, but remember, I know Carrie. We already had the conversation. Yeah. You will eventually need to do this, and you don't have to right away, but by the way, I think it was before November because do you know that I gave your number to him twice?
Yes.
Okay.
But I thought it was like, what, October, November?
Maybe
again
it was.
In January?
Maybe.
Because we finally met in February.
On my birthday!
That's right.
My birthday! So basically, I gave him Lorraine's number, and he was...
An email.
So he could non-confrontationally communicate.
Yeah, so he reached out to me, finally.
Well, first he said...
By email.
Yes. So he said... Okay. But I could tell it's that okay, like your teenagers that are like, please stop talking to me about this.
Exactly.
So hug, love you.
I'll reach out to her.
Yeah.
Don't have her reach out to me.
Yeah, exactly. So I let it go, and I thought, it's okay. And I validated. I said, I know you may not be ready, but just all these well-meaning friends and family, we don't understand.
Right.
Here's a person who understands at some level what you're going through.
Yeah.
So I was trying to market it in more of that way of like I know you're a guy and you won't go to a support group, but this could be, and by the way, I heard she's really, really cute. And so he threw it away or lost it or whatever, and then a few months later
So
passed.
he tells me that come New Year's is kind of when he decided, okay, I need to move forward. I need to be done being sad. I need to get on with my life. It's time to... And then he remembered, there's this girl that Ganel-Lyn tried to hook me up with. All right. And so he reached out to you again.
And I said,
the email address.
Yes. I can get you that again.
Exactly.
And then I don't get in his business for a few weeks. I don't know anything. Then I'm like, did he lose it again? Is he waiting? Right. And all of a sudden I reach out, and you guys have actually met in person. And
so we communicated by email for 2 weeks.
And what were those conversations like? Because I think that's an important part of the story of grieving, of giving permission to our listeners that at some point the person that has passed wants you to be happy.
Yes.
They do want you to be happy. Yes. And part of their pain is watching your pain. I've come to know that with Meg.
Right.
Is that she wants me to tell her story, but she also wants me to find joy and not be stuck in this cycle of what ifs and why denies.
Sure.
So I think it's important to say, hey, we're to the point where it's time to be happy and feel connection with another warm-bodied person.
Yes. And...
because we're not wired to be alone. We're not.
But at the same time,
you
have family members who, in their own little world of, I don't know if it's been long enough for you to be dating someone. Everyone has an opinion.
Everyone's like, and no one was in the marriage originally. No one knows. Yeah. I mean, Carrie's sisters knew Carrie and what she had shared with me, she had shared with them.
And they were thrilled for Evan to be, because they knew what Carrie wanted.
So this is the coolest part of the whole story is the after, because there's a uniqueness to all of us that just doesn't happen. But if we could bottle this all up and sell it in a store, it would change families dramatically. Because connection in the Mason family is on like 50,000 levels. So when he reached out to you finally, what was the first few weeks of communicating?
His first email was very vague, so I got your email address from a mutual friend that we have, and it was just very brief. And I knew where he was at. I mean, it had only been, 7 months for him? I knew where I was at 7 months. It was a hard time for me at 7 months.
And the person you lose gets frozen in a weird time zone.
Yeah, for sure.
In a place that's almost overly perfected in your head.
Oh, absolutely.
And idolized. So yes, Carrie was wonderful, but she was not perfect. And so I know why you read that original article, which is very glorifying of her strengths and her beauty.
And it should be.
And it should be. But that's the other reality of grief and widowhood specifically, that the spouses almost become idolized.
Yes.
You don't remember all the annoyances, socks on the floor, because you're like, they're gone. So
you only want to remember the good.
Yeah,
for sure.
So he was definitely still in that first year where everything was the first time.
And I could tell that he was really, he was more feeling obligated to reach out. Not even necessarily for you.
Oh, good. But I don't mind throwing guilt in there.
But because he knew what his wife wanted. He knew it was
needed. He had a little
girl. He had a little 2-year-old.
Yes.
You know, Ellie was 2. She turned 2 after her mom passed that July. So she was really little, and just how overwhelming that got
Which
to
is
be.
very different, because he had been a single dad of boys that still had their mom around.
Right.
And a little girl, all of a sudden you're like, and Carrie had clothes for Ellie. So just the clothes and the hair and the girl stuff, right?
Yeah, and so he was helping get her to, she had so many wonderful caregivers during that period of time. Aunts and grandma and friends, good friends that were taking care of her. But how exhausting to
passing her.
Yes. And he, I think, was getting really worn out by that. So he reaches out, and I could tell his hesitation there. And so I was very disarming with him and just said, look, I get where you're at. There's no rush. There's no obligation for you to ever talk to me. But if I can be of some help to you, I would love to share some of my experiences, where I'm at now, how I navigated it in the first year, if you want any help with that. And I just kind of left it at that. Just no pressure at all. And I think that really helped him to realize, okay, I don't have to date her.
Yes, I don't have to marry her.
She could just be a friend. And
Which is what I said in the first place.
And I really looked at it that way anyway, because I thought, there's no way I would marry him. Yeah. He was married to the perfect woman, and I could never do that. I could never fill those shoes. So for me, it wasn't even, I didn't even think that I would ever marry him.
We all did.
So I was going into it very, very genuinely
innocent.
I'm just a friend. Yeah, totally a friend. And that really helped him.
So you did that for a couple weeks.
Yeah. So
and then you went on a first date?
I finally, we emailed every day, and very detailed, really got to know each other.
I love that.
Long emails of, this is what I like. And he was so good about asking questions to me, like, what's your favorite this? Where's your dream vacation? What's your dream car? What would you just questions that I would never think to ask someone. It was so different from anyone else I had ever dated. And this was all by email. Just getting to know each other. Like, he would say stuff like, yeah, I go to Costco and I buy all these paper goods so I don't have to wash the dishes. And I just died laughing, because I was doing the same thing. So many things. We had so much in common immediately, and just got to know each other so quickly. And he would write his emails really late and then put them on a timer to dispatch to me, and they would hit my inbox at 8 a.m. So I would hear this ding in my inbox and just, Pavlov,
and was your
light up my heart, just Twitter painted of, it's an email from him.
And connection. It was real connection about.
It was so good.
And another adult, a brain of someone
who got me.
And
someone
the daily
who knew
parts
how
of
I
your
felt
day.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really neat. So to go back and forth, and we would just email back and forth. We did that for about 2 weeks. And then I finally said, any chance we can meet up? Or he did. I can't remember.
Someone did.
So we met up for drinks at Maggleby's Fresh.
February 1st.
February 1st.
What year?
2008. So, and it was after we started emailing January 19th. I mean, that's how quick that
How
went.
long were Carrie and Evan married? Because they both had been married previously as well. Do you remember?
I don't.
Okay.
I can't speak to that.
Okay, I don't remember
I should
either.
know. I should know that answer.
The reason I'll
Probably-
circle back why I'm going to ask that.
I'm going to guess 8 years.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
I should know.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. So,
Anyway.
so you meet the first time face to face, and then what? What do you feel? Hello,
Holy cow.
because he's this tall, cute.
Yeah, so he was already there.
And she's so
So I
beautiful.
pull in and I walk in and he immediately stands up from the booth and greets me at the door, and he's 6'6", gorgeous. I melted. I mean, immediately I'm like, oh, and he's gorgeous. And more than the magazine portrayed, and more than I ever
Felt.
expected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, not that, obviously, looks aren't, I was already,
Wait a minute, though.
I was already hooked. I was
Let me
already
say
in
this,
love.
though. Carrie and I specifically, I've said this to you before, Carrie and I specifically said, we do not want, if something happens to us, our husbands to marry out of obligation to take care of the kids.
Yeah.
We want them to marry madly in love.
Right.
Madly.
Right.
We said some other stuff,
Yeah,
but we
sure.
won't put it on the podcast. And
You know what it is.
You know what I'm saying. We did not want, and I've said this
Yeah.
to my kids, if something happens to me, make sure dad falls madly.
Yes.
He has so much love to give.
Yeah.
And Evan is the same. I adore Evan.
Yeah.
He has so much to give that we are wired for connection. And Carrie wanted him to be madly in love
Right.
again. Not just
Right.
like, oh, well, I don't want to be alone and I just
Yeah.
want someone to take care of my daughter.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
that
before I
attraction
even
was
went,
important.
I was so smitten.
Yeah.
I couldn't think anything else. I couldn't concentrate. I was happier than I had been in 3 years.
Yes.
So happy. I could feel a difference in this one just by email. So I was a little nervous that my heart was going to get broken because
You were already all in.
I was already hooked, and I hadn't even met him yet. And so to
Which
meet
is
him,
so beautiful that the emails created.
because there was so much depth
Yeah.
to our emails. There was so much there.
And I know he felt the same about you.
Yeah. Well,
He
obviously,
adored
he
you so.
set it up from the beginning that I am busy all the way through the end of March. Like, he had all these events. He travels, and
Yes.
he's out of town a lot. So he had all these reasons why we couldn't date until the end of March was going to be the first time we would get to date. That was like in our second
Just
email.
wait to find out what's coming.
Yes. So here we are, February
1st.
And I talked him into I didn't even have to talk him into it. We just met up for drinks. We ended up sitting there in Maggleby's for 2 hours, just talking and laughing and connecting, and it was amazing. And we set our next date right then. He wanted it to be that night. He's like, well, maybe my mom could pick up Ellie and we could go out tonight and continue this conversation.
Yes.
You know, we were
You
just
just
both
knew.
so hungry for that
connection.
connection with someone that really understood
Yes.
and got us. And it was pretty amazing.
And in those initial dating, you had the freedom to talk about Robbie and Carrie.
Yes. And that was huge. That was huge.
Because sometimes when you're dating, if you haven't lost a spouse, you don't talk about your exes with your new person.
Right.
But it wasn't that they weren't in your lives because you divorced or you didn't love them anymore.
Exactly.
It's this never-ending, non-ending story.
That's
part
right.
of your heart.
That's right. And other guys that I dated
Don't
were
know
really
how to-
threatened by that.
Yeah.
They were threatened by the fact
And
that
women
I was
could
still
be
in
too.
love.
Like Carrie's idolized and Robbie's frozen in time.
Of course.
Right. And then,
Of
you're
course.
part of that person, and that heart connection doesn't change.
Yeah.
Just because you're now like, wait, I don't want to be alone the rest of my life.
Exactly.
And I think I'm falling in love with someone new.
Right.
I tell my kids all the time, everyone you love teaches you about love.
Yes.
So the reason I love your dad is because I loved these other people.
Yes. And it builds.
And it
That's
builds.
what people don't really
don't get
understand
it.
a lot of times
Yes.
is you don't have to push someone out to love someone new. Your ability to love increases the more you love.
Yes, which is why I wanted her today. We could have a lot of people that have lost people they love and remarried. But the beautiful part is this is not just lip service. You and Evan have continued for now 11 years. to create space for Carrie and Robbie.
Yes.
From the first date to when you decided to get married. How many weeks was that?
It was 74 days. Before we were married. Not even deciding. Like, we knew.
You knew the first
proposed
week.
February 14th after we met on February 1st.
So 2 weeks later. 2 weeks of email. First date. 2 weeks later, you're engaged.
Yeah. And it was just logistics.
Natural.
Trying to figure out, okay, when can we do this? Because we knew. We knew immediately. We really did. And we talked nightly. We kept that conversation. We saw each other almost every day. It was speed dating for sure. But
and
when
once
you know,
you've been
you
married,
know.
And you've already gone through what both of you had.
Yes.
It's not like we're going to need to decide, like, oh, do you complete me?
Yes.
And no.
And I've told other friends who have been in similar situations, they kind of struggled with the whole dating thing. And I've said, you know what? Don't overthink it. Because when you meet the right guy,
you'll know.
You're going to know.
Yeah.
You'll know immediately.
Yeah.
It just feels so much different than anyone else.
It feels like, I don't know how you say it to college kids specifically that ask me about this. I say it feels like coming home.
Oh, yeah.
Because Hollywood makes it about, like, rockets and Star Wars and blah, blah. And it's really like, yes, you're attracted, but you're home. You're like, there's a comfort and an awareness and a knowing about each other that's not just we're dating and we're super this or that.
Right.
My favorite scene in Hello, Dolly is at the end. Do you remember this? Mm-mm. Do you know this movie? She's grieving the loss of Ephraim, her son, her husband that has passed, and she's wanting to marry this crotchety old, store owner, and she at one point says, I would paint the shutters of the store in green. Well, the last scene comes and you think that they're hating each other and they're not talking, and she shows up and there's a painter and he's grouchy and yelling at everyone, if you know this movie. And she says, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm having the shutters painted in green. And she turned, and she had asked for her late husband to give her a sign. And so that was the sign that she knew that it was the right thing. So at your wedding, it was very dear. It was on a golf course.
It was. Evan was an avid golfer.
Yes.
Still is. And as Robbie loved to golf as well.
Isn't that interesting?
I just, he invited me to go, but our kids were so little and it's not cheap.
No.
And it takes a lot of time away. So you're paying for golf and a babysitter and. And so I never really got to go with Robbie.
How did the kids handle it when you said we're getting married?
Well, I first brought him over to meet them. Once I knew. Once I, recognized this is the guy. I brought him to my home, and I told my kids, I'm bringing over a special guy that I need you to meet. And brought him in, and we all sat around and just started chatting with him and interacting with him, and they adored him immediately.
He's very easy to be around.
Yeah, very, very.
He's not going to come in like a bowl in a china cabinet. Yeah. And what I would say is that's a really good takeaway for people listening to this that may be in that phase, is that be respectful that your kids are grieving at their own.
Yes, and I did that wrong. Other times.
Other times. You had learned.
Previously, I did that the wrong way with other
people.
Yeah. And so I learned that one that that's the way to do it. You need to be sure yourself before you let your kids get attached to someone else or them to the kids. Or
to the kids, yeah.
Yeah, but so immediately my 7-year-old, as we're interacting, she leans over. This is Lexi.
Oh my gosh.
She looks at Evan and she says, it's so sweet. Will you marry my mom?
Oh my gosh.
It was the cutest thing out of her little mouth, that she felt such a connection. All of the kids did. That, will you marry my mom? And he says to her, well, I don't have a ring yet. And she says, well, you can get one quick, can't you? So sweet.
And what just happened in Lexi's life?
Which part?
It's just so funny to me. These little babies are adults and growing up and doing, they have had this whole life experience.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. Well, and my oldest that was 11, well, no, he was now 15.
Which is a hard age.
14. I can't remember, but 3 years later, so yeah, he was 14 at the time. Even he had struggled. Anytime I dated before Evan, he really struggled. In fact, I dated Evan very quietly.
Yeah.
I didn't tell my kids I'm going on a date. It was just, I'm going out.
Yeah.
I'll be back later. I didn't tell them I was dating because it got to where
It
it was
had
hard
been,
for them.
yeah,
It was too hard for them. And so once I told him about Evan, I actually told him about Evan before I introduced all of the kids because I wanted him to be comfortable with it. Yeah. For the first time, he was very accepting. And I know it's also because I took the time to say a prayer ahead of that and say,
God help soften hearts.
If you can let Robbie be here with me while I talk to Braxton, I would really appreciate that. Because I think it will help. He needs to know that his dad is okay with this.
Yes.
Because I've received that.
Yes.
He needs to get that.
Yes.
And it was magical.
I love that. Power of prayer, right?
So the Spirit was so strong during that. But even he was saying, he's 6'6", and he'd already measured my bed and knew it was long enough for Evan to lay in at 6'6". I haven't
heard that
what?
Story. That's pretty cute.
He's on
he's like the
totally
dad of the house.
it.
He's the man of the house when Robbie died.
Yeah, unfortunately,
he
not
had to,
because I put that on him, but because they naturally take that responsibility a little bit.
So the wedding was beautiful because there were pictures on a golf course. Carrie and Robbie's pictures were there, and it was very much a family experience.
Very.
And I'm going to say this is really the heart of what I wanted to share, is since those early days of falling in love and blending this family, it has not been easy.
At all.
It is not easy to take children that have gone through grief themselves, and blending a family in general is challenging, and raising a little girl that lost a mom very early. We have really watched Lorraine step into that role, and it's hard. But some of the things I've observed that I really hope people learn from hearing your story is that our sister lunches, they haven't been happening as regular, but for a few years there, we would regularly go on sister lunches with all of Carrie's sisters, and Lorraine and I are honorary sisters. And Lorraine,
I'm very honored.
And Carrie's sisters and family very much treat your children. It's not just you and Evan.
It's not.
It's the extended families have literally embraced each of the other new family that has come.
It's been amazing.
And you have continued as the wife and the mom to support and help Evan show up for Carrie's family. Yeah. So they're my friends too on the side. So if there's a family something that's happening with one of the kids, Evan and Lorraine are always there. And those aunties are always there even for your kids.
Yeah. Try to be.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
Families
are busy because now all those families are bigger now.
Yeah, for sure.
And one of the things that I just have loved the most is that you have maintained a space for Robbie to be forever loved. Yeah. And for Carrie to be forever loved. Yeah. So on birthdays and anniversaries, you will see on social media that they honor Mother's Day. It's some of the sweetest things. Lorraine has made sure that Ellie knows her mom. And especially those first few years as Ellie got to the point of being very aware of the loss. Mm-hmm. Like, I think you can understand it as a 2-year-old versus an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old, and helping a young girl navigate all those feelings. Lorraine has made sure that Ellie knows who were important friends in Carrie's life, and they go to the graveside and they celebrate her and honor her in such a beautiful way. What has helped you guys do that? Because that is the unique thing I wish I could package. That is the thing. How have you navigated triggers of like resentment, frustration, jealousy? Has that ever come up?
I think in the beginning there may have been times where things were said that would make me feel like, I'm not quite doing it right. I'm not quite doing it the way Carrie would
do it.
I'm not enough in this situation. But over time, we have just learned that when you edify each other to the kids and you edify our spouses that are not here, everyone is happier.
Everyone is happier.
Yeah.
Because those children left behind, I say this for divorce. Yeah. You know, I say do not speak ill of your ex because your children are half of that person.
Agreed.
So if you speak ill of them, your children literally internalize that to mean, wait, if you hate this about my mom or my dad, then you must hate that about me.
Right.
And the same is said with death is when you celebrate Robbie and Carrie, then their children who are still here can celebrate the parts of them that identify with their parents.
Absolutely. And I think in our situation, it's kind of unique in that we both have lost a spouse to death.
Yes.
I want to feel comfortable sharing my feelings if I'm having a hard day or if I'm missing him or his birthday or whatever it is. And Evan has always been so supportive of that. So supportive. He'll shoot me a text that says, I hope you have a great day remembering your sweetheart today. I hope today is a beautiful day for you as you think about the love you shared. Not even a smidge of jealousy there. And it has allowed me to be able to do the same thing.
And not shut that part of you away.
Not push it out.
Because it is what's made you the amazing wife to him and mother and all of that.
And he knows that when I'm happy in that way, he's happier and vice versa.
I love that. And they practice this. It is consistent. I thought, will they continue? And it's 11 years later. They're still like showing the example to the world of what is possible in healing, in forgiving, in loving, and that love doesn't stop. My husband does the same for me for my first love and ex. Like, we were never married, but he'll say, and my ex once in a while, every 10 years or so, will pop up and say hello, and he'll say, how's Rob? How are your babies? Right? And it's true. It's like we think that love is this like finite source of energy, and it's not. It's infinite. And as we allow it to expand, the more you give, the
more you have to give. Is really the way that works.
And that is the life force that we all are so dependent on. And so much in our world is about like shutting things off, and you both have just done a brilliant job. Thank you for, oh my gosh, I didn't expect to be so emotional, but most of the guests that bring emotional stories, I didn't live the story. And so
this one you did.
I did, and I feel really blessed. I feel like that was another divine God orchestration that Carrie and I have the same doctor.
Well, and I don't know if you remember this, but that doctor delivered Jasper, my youngest. He was a step-in doctor because mine was out of town.
That's right.
So I had known him just from that delivery those years before.
I'm Marco Poloing him on the way home today, because really that was, I mean, I think death is hard no matter what. Cancer is yuck no matter what. Struggles with addiction and depression and anxiety, it's hard. This is hard stuff, blending families. But I think when we can pull back just a little, and sometimes you have to live it a while to see the forest for the trees, right? You're in the grief of whatever, or the fight with addiction, or the fight with your family member, to pull back and go, oh my gosh, God really does have a plan for all of us. And even when we're in our darkest places, I hope your story today inspires someone to move through their grief, to keep loving who they've lost.
Yeah, for sure.
Share that love forward and realize that you have a unique love to give now because you've lost. Like you and Evan love more beautifully because you don't take it for granted.
I was going to say just that.
Yeah.
You appreciate the small things. You don't let the small things become big things. Yeah. You know, the socks on the floor, the toilet paper roll going the wrong way, the tooth, whatever it is. We try to not let those little things make a big splash.
Because those are the things you miss when they're gone.
Exactly.
Every time my husband does these two things that sometimes drive me crazy, and I'll stop sometimes and say, I bet if he leaves before I leave, that will make me cry.
It will.
I'm going to just be grateful
he
left that drawer open again. Every night
so
by clockwork.
So true.
If he's listening, you know what I'm talking about. Thank you, friend, for your example and friendship in my life. Thank you for living what is not easy. And we could do many more podcasts on many other subjects. We're only telling you one story here.
That's right.
There's a lot of stories we've shared the last 11 years. And it's been such a blessing for me to watch it and to learn from it and to cheer you and Evan on. And
thank you for being a huge part of our story.
Oh my gosh. I'm expecting, I don't know what, in the retirement, I want a room in the mansion or something. I don't know.
You've got it.
And thank you for joining us here at the ReConnect Podcast. If you want to hear more of Lorraine's story, it's in I Can Do Hard Things with God. It's the first book we worked on together, my first baby out of my book babies. And you can get that on Amazon or wherever else. She writes it even so more beautifully, and I think there's some power on paper that you can mark it up. And I really hope if there's just one today that hears this and feels hope
That's my
in their
well.
loss,
Yeah, for sure. It's hard.
It is hard. And we've brushed over the long days of trying to learn how to take care of a family and lose a spouse. It's we brushed over, and we know, both of us know on different levels, that it's a messy process.
Yeah, for sure.
And it takes time. And then you think you get through it, and then something happens with your kids later, and it's like you're back right at the beginning. And we've done that too, right? Like,
absolutely.
You're like, wait, are we really back here? I thought we healed that already. And we've got to dig up that old story, because now it's playing out in our family in a new way.
Well, and as time moves on and the kids
you
grow, you grieve them in different ways.
Oh my gosh, I say that all the time.
Yeah.
Your new normal is a new normal, but it doesn't get easier, because now I want to call Meg about Cam coming home from Africa. Yeah. 5 years ago, that's not what I missed about her.
Right.
So thank you. I love you so much.
Thank you for listening to the ReConnect Podcast, presented by Anasazi Foundation. Are you worried about your teenager? Are they struggling with depression, low self-esteem, anger, drugs, or suicidal thoughts and feelings? If so, Anasazi Foundation can help. Anasazi is a wilderness therapy program for at-risk youth, and our mission is to help turn hearts homeward. To learn more about us, please visit anasazi.org. If you liked this show, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Thank you again.